The final decree will go forth, and God's message will go to the ends of the earth. Men and women will be saved or lost. The door of probation will close, and the 7 last plagues will be poured out. Then Jesus will come to deliver his people. Revelation 16 verse 1 reads, "Then I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the 7 angels, Go and pour out the bowls of the wrath of God on the earth." Now, my friend, do God's people go through the tribulation? Are God's people delivered before this time of trouble, or do they live through it under the protecting hand of God? These plagues are called the 7 last plagues. Now, my friend, where were their plagues before these? Yes, and we can recall that very clearly, how the Bible tells of the story of the plagues that fell on Egypt. And the wonderful element was that the Israelites were protected by God during all of those plagues that were poured out on the Egyptians. The Israelites lived through all of those plagues and were delivered after the last one. Now, just as the Israelites were present through the plagues and delivered at the end, so God's people are present and protected through the plagues and will be delivered at the end. Likewise, in Daniel's time, the Hebrew worthies said, "We will not bow down to that counterfeit image and accept the beast power." And by faith they went into the flames. And they actually said, "We'd rather die than yield our faith." God's people went through the first plagues in Egypt and were preserved. Those 3 men went through Nebuchadnezzar's fire and were preserved. And notice further what Revelation says of those who are redeemed and stand with Christ in heaven. And I share a synopsis of Revelation 7 verses 14, 15, 16 and 17. These are the ones who come out of the great tribulation. Now, my friend, what do these people come out of? The great tribulation. It is a multitude so large you cannot number them. They had faith. They hung on when all around them there were things crumbling. There was financial collapse. All of nature was in turmoil, and many were persecuted by God's enemies. But they came out of the great tribulation and they stand at God's throne victorious. God preserved them through tribulation, just as he did in the stories of the Bible. Let us look at the 7 last plagues now. There's a much deeper message in these plagues than most people actually ever imagined. Now, what are those 7 last plagues? Number 1, sores from head to toe. The Bible describes them this way. Revelation 16 verse 2, a foul and loathsome sore. Now those who enforce the mark of the beast say, unless you take the mark of the beast, we are going to physically afflict you. And they say, if you want to be physically protected, you must take the mark of the beast. So the first plague is about physical affliction, sores from head to toe. Now what those who promote the mark of the beast promise, they cannot deliver. The first plague has a much deeper message than some have ever understood. So do you now know what the first plague really is saying, my friend? There is no physical security outside of Christ. There is no physical security outside of Christ. Church and state unite. Pressure is applied to God's people. The authorities declare they are going to physically oppress you unless you receive the mark of the beast. But in reality, it is those who receive the mark of the beast who are physically afflicted by the plagues. Jesus is our only protector. Listen to his promise for his people. Psalms 46 verses 1 and 2. And this is one of my favorites. Even Martin Luther wrote that marvelous hymn based on the psalm, "A mighty fortress is our God." Psalms 46 verses 1 and 2. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea. My friend, why don't we fear when there are terrible calamities afflicting the physical bodies of men and women, and a myriad of natural disasters afflicting the whole earth? Because God is our refuge and our strength. All our physical security is in Christ. And the second plague is when the sea turns into blood. We read of it in Revelation 16 verse 3. Then the second angel poured out his bowl on the sea, and it became blood as of a dead man, and every living creature in the sea died. Now, my friend, can you possibly imagine what would happen if anything like this occurred? If the sea actually became like blood, and if every living thing in the sea died? What would it do to our international shipping? What about the fishing industry? What about the billions of dollars of the tourist industry? It would destroy the economy of the world. But those enforcing the mark of the beast think they control everything, even the weather, and who buys and who sells. And they say all economic security is in the beast power. But what does the second plague say? The only economic security is in Jesus Christ. The only economic security is in Jesus Christ. And now let's look at the third plague. It also has a message about Christ. And this plague turns the rivers into blood. Revelation 16 verse 4 reads, Then the third angel poured out his bowl on the rivers and springs of water, and they became blood. Now, why did God do that? Why do the rivers and the springs of water become blood? What is water a symbol of in the Bible? Water is a symbol of life in the Bible. Revelation 16 verses 5 and 6, And I heard the angel of the waters saying, You are righteous, O Lord, the one who is and who was and who is to be, because you have judged these things, for they have shed the blood of the saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink, for it is their just due.